The term Realpolitik has its origins in 19th century Europe. It was coined by von Rochau to refer to a worldview that is structured on the basis of the relative power of states over the others. Hence, Emery defines Realpolitik as a political theory that subtracts morality from power, which is ruled by the law of the strongest. We will demonstrate how Wu Zetian and Hobbes can be understood through the prisma of realpolitik despite belonging to totally different historical, political, and social contexts.
Wu Zetian was the only empress that China had known. Following the Tang era dynasty, Wu ruled more than half of a century. Since her earliest years, her family had good relations with a powerful family of the era. She was well educated and she entered the palace of Taizong, the second emperor of the Tang dynasty, as a lower concubine at the age of 14. She rose step by step, her status defeating her rivals without apparently any harm of conscience. She fostered meritocracy and her power was present on her objects coming from the actual Syria, Uzbekistan, India, and Sri Lanka, and in her palace. Wu Zetian built in 3 years the Diamond Palace that was 22 times the size of the Acropolis, probably the largest palace in the world at that time. In fact, Wu Zetian was feared and respected by the international community.
Thomas Hobbes was an English philosopher born in 1588 in Westport. Their theories were influenced majorly by the English Civil War, a bloody conflict that led to death of more than 2,000 people. Hobbes was by nature a peaceful and cautious man. He is remembered by Leviathan, in which he explains why one should obey the governmental authority, even one of an imperfect kind, in order to avoid risk of chaos and bloodshed. To understand the background of Hobbes' conservatism, first we need to analyze what was happening across Western Europe in the 17th century, and therefore understand on what basis people should obey authority rules. Before, the divine right of kings existed, but after, this theory wasn't persuasive anymore. Thoughtful people argued that the right to rule laid on the population, who gave the kings power. This was known as the social contract theory of government, which is portrayed in Leviathan. Hobbes was scared of the consequences of the social contract theory, which would encourage people to depose rulers whenever they felt unhappy with their policies. Therefore, in Leviathan, Hobbes puts forward a theory that ties up social contract with the defense of total obedience and submission to traditional authority. He went back to the period of state of nature and described it as a chaotic place of fighting, resembling the English Civil War. Therefore, people, out of fear and chaos, were alleged to form governments, willingly signing a social contract, but as consequence, falling into strong authority, which therefore they had the duty to keep obeying. They could only disobey if the king threatened to kill them directly.
Power as a center for interaction. Hobbes theorized the fact that all mankind has a general inclination and restless desire for power. Parallelly, Wu Zetian put into practice this unsatisfiable fight for power. In fact, she was the only concubine that achieved to make her way to the Chinese throne as an empress in her own right. Wu Zetian was extremely intelligent and carefully calculated every move. She was persistent in her rough path. She made many sacrifices in order to get power.
The interest of the state prevails above moral and ethics. Wu Zetian brutally repressed rebellions against her. As Clemens puts it, she was prepared to suggest that it was better to kill a rebellious horse than let it fight on. Consequently, Hobbes sustained that one should obey governmental authority, even of a very unperfected kind, in order to avoid the risk of chaos and bloodshed.
Political realism. Politics, like society in general, is governed by objective laws rooted in the nature of men. On one side, Hobbes' figure of the Leviathan is the portrayal of how man is naturally evil. In her turn, Wu Zetian mistrust also shows her belief that anyone is deeply corrupted by the will to survive. She eliminated any suspected enemy of her way. On the other side, Hobbes stated, "The way of one competitor to the attaining of his desire is to kill, subdue, supplant, or resell the other. Wu Zetian also acknowledged the law of the strongest. She has been portrayed as a strong, harsh leader that knew how to maintain her supremacy by reaffirming her power with cold-hearted strategies and by building impressive monuments as a sign of wealth and stability.
The end justifies the means. Wu Zetian often forgot ethics and acted pursuing a clear objective, leaving behind any regret. For example, she replaced Empress Wang by killing her daughter and making the Emperor Gaozong believe that she was a murderer. Likewise, Hobbes averted that we have the fundamental right to choose the means we think that fit to the situation in which we find ourselves.
Zero-sum power game. According to Hobbes, the state needs to be interconnected with people because the consequences of social contract could encourage rebellions and deposing of rulings if the policies gain on popularity. Instead, Wu Zetian understood that in order to keep power, her enemies needed to be eliminated, so she created a secret spy net. However, she also was fair to the deserving ones, like scholars and upraised peasants, by giving more value to public work.
To sum up, we can see how these two different perspectives, going in different historical moments, converge in a very similar vision following the basis of Realpolitik. Both sacrifice for the will of power which is inherent in human nature. They agreed on the idea that humans are evil, especially Wu Zetian, which applied this notion vigorously. She boasted the creation of her own spy net to get rid of all her enemies. At the end, we can see there is the law of the strongest.